What's up, everybody? I'm Stan, and welcome to Detail Comics, where we go over comics in detail. This is Comic Cinema. It's a brand new show that I'm going to be doing regarding movies and movie reviews. So what I want to do is I want to talk about Doctor Strange. So I just made my way out of the theater, and to be honest with you, it's a little bit tough for me to process this at this point in time. So let's break things down in a very simple, structured manner. To begin with, we're going to talk about the story. And overall, the story of Doctor Strange is a very simple one. We're going to start out with Stephen Strange as his brilliant neuroscientist self, eventually progressing through his origin story, his eventual learning of the magical, mystical arts, and then all the way through the final conflict with various villains. I want to keep this kind of spoiler-free, and I'm sure that a lot of you have already either seen it or you have a good idea what's going on, but I want to kind of leave it a little bit more vague for those individuals that haven't had the chance to see it or haven't really been exposed to the trailers too much. But what we see in the story is that the story itself is pretty standard. It's pretty standard fare for this type of movie, and the origin story is definitely something that's very necessary. While it's okay to introduce a character like Spider-Man without any kind of origin, because everybody's seen that, Doctor Strange is a very unique individual, and he's got certain circumstances that are going to cause him to become a more compelling character, even though he can be a complete ass. With that in mind, the execution of Doctor Strange's origin story is very good. Overall, he shows him to be an overachiever in terms of what he wants for a scholastic achievement, because he has got this drastic fear of failure, and as well as his just giant level of progression. I really like what they did with it. It's very condensed because it's a 2-hour-long movie. It's one of the shortest movies that's come out of Marvel in a long time. But the execution of the origin story is very good. The third act is where things get a little rough and tumble with a final conflict with the main villain and antagonists, but that can be expected in such a truncated movie. There wasn't really a whole lot of time to flesh that out, and the giant reveal at the end was like, oh my god, it came out of nowhere, but the resolution was creative, so I'll take it. That was pretty okay. Definitely something that was not necessarily what I was anticipating, but a very welcome addition. I can't wait to see them flesh out that main villain character a lot more over the course of a few movies, because that's really what it needs. Then, while we're on the subject of characters, let's talk about the individual portrayals that the actors had. Benedict Cumberbatch really got into his role as Stephen Strange, and this is one of those situations where you're going to see him in a very similar way that you see Robert Downey Jr. Robert Downey Jr. is Tony Stark. There's no longer a separation, and Benedict Cumberbatch is going to be Stephen Strange. He just embodied that role like heart and soul and spectral form and astral projection. Yeah, he is Dr. Stephen Strange for all intents and purposes. The way that he carried off that brilliant arrogance at the beginning of the movie, as well as carrying it through the rest of the film, slowly making his way into a slightly more humble and self-sacrificial role towards the end, definitely a really good character arc and good character development. We've got Tilda Swinton as the Ancient One. Her portrayal, while not what people were expecting, is still a very good one. She's an exceptional actress, and I really like her portrayal of the Ancient One, even though it's not necessarily traditional comic book Ancient One. Wong really stole the show as Wong. I love his deadpan kind of situation. It's a very similar role to what you'd see out of Drax, where he's just this very serious kind of person and doesn't really lend himself to the humor, but that's what makes it humorous. So that's very cool. Mads Mikkelsen's a great actor, but the way that the dialogue and the way that the structure of the story was set up, it wasn't really geared more towards the villain aspect. It wasn't about conquering the villains. It was about the development of Stephen Strange. So he was really put on the back burner. And you can kind of see that right from the start. He doesn't really get a whole hell of a lot of backstory, as well as the fact that he doesn't really get much of a compelling arc that goes along with this. He's really relatively disposable. But if we're talking about characters, Chiwetel Ejifor's Baron Mordo is probably one of the most underutilized people in the Doctor Strange universe, as someone that would become, in the comic books, one of his greatest enemies, one of his biggest adversaries over the course of Stephen Strange's real career in the comic books. He was really... His motivations were a little weird. They were a little lackluster. They weren't necessarily what I was expecting. And when you watch the movie, you're definitely you might get that same kind of sense. I don't necessarily know. This is me just kind of spitballing off of just seeing the movie. And I just felt like he was a little bit undercooked in terms of his character, especially when you're talking about the post-credit scenes and how all those things kind of flowed together. But overall, I really like the performances. The cast is just stellar. And for the movie, it's not necessarily the best movie, but it is definitely a really good film, especially inside the MCU, and I can't wait to see more of Dr. Stephen Strange. And that's primarily because of the visuals. And man, are those visuals breathtaking. It's just one of those situations where if you're talking about the Inception level manipulation of the world and the various dimensions, the whole acid trippy Stephen Strange magical mystery tour through the dimensions of different multiple universes, it was just mind-blowing. And I saw this in regular theater. You know, it was really nice. It was like a Sony 4K theater, but it wasn't IMAX 3D. And to be honest with you, I'm going to go back and I'm going to watch it in IMAX 3D because I now can see where those visuals were meant to be seen in 3D. Not like they could just only be enhanced. They couldn't really be hindered by IMAX, you know, that large, high-resolution screen, and the 3D aspects that would really be associated with that. So if you're talking about, if you haven't seen it yet, and you have the ability to go see it in IMAX 3D, I would definitely start there, because that way you get the most thrilling visuals up front, compared to, say, like seeing it on a regular theater. You're still going to enjoy it on a regular theater because this first sequence within the first half an hour with Stephen Strange and the Ancient One is just a mind bender, which is super rad. But I mean, it's something that would only be enhanced by 3D if it's executed properly. And from everything that I've been hearing, it is one of the best films to see in 3D in a long time. So overall, I would say that Doctor Strange is one of the better movies to come out. It's definitely pacing above, you know, like Iron Man 2, Iron Man 3, Thor the Dark World, Thor in general. I'd say that it's definitely a very good film, but much more serious than, say, something like Ant-Man. I don't think it's going to break into the top 5 of Marvel movies, but for a character that's got a very weird and convoluted backstory that deals in dimensions and magic and all these different aspects that are very tough to wrap your mind around, this is definitely a great success as far as portraying that character in film. The execution of magic is phenomenal, and I really recommend that people go out and check this out so that way you can become more familiar with Doctor Strange as a character and really kind of get filled in on the MCU aspects, because there are certain Easter eggs in there that are going to connect to various other films, because it's a Marvel movie and they always do that. So that's my impression of Doctor Strange the movie, but I want to know what you guys thought too when you saw it, so let me know in the comments down below and we can have that conversation. As always, if you like what you see, hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe right there to get more news, reviews, and commentary on comic books, comic book movies, comic book TV shows and games, and anything and everything inside the world of comics.